I want to bring in Shahram Akbarzadeh, a professor at Deakin University, joining us live from Melbourne. Professor, very good to have you on the program. I just want to get your take on these words from Donald Trump tonight, where he basically says Iran must make peace, either peace or tragedy. What does that peace look like? What's Donald Trump's endgame here?
Well, thanks for having me. Donald Trump's endgame is a complete capitulation of Iran, which is fanciful. I cannot recall any country succumbing to foreign invasion, foreign attacks like this. The Iranian authorities had made it clear that if the U.S. steps in and enters the conflict on the side of Israel, it would make U.S. assets in the region a legitimate target. So the U.S. has now done this, and there's every indication and every reason to believe that Iran would retaliate. Of course, Iran has another option in front of it, given that there is consensus internationally, barring the U.S. and Israel, that the U.S. action was an act of war and it was illegal, given that there was no imminent threat from Iran towards the United States. Iran can mount a diplomatic offensive in the United Nations Security Council to gain international condemnation of the United States. But we know that the U.S. doesn't really care, especially under Trump's administration. They don't really care about diplomatic condemnation. So the only language that Trump seems to understand and really value is the language of might and a language of power. So, and I fear that will lead the Iranians towards a military response, which could be devastating for the whole region.
Yeah, there was no question that he was, in fact, threatening more military strikes. He even said that there are other targets that could be targeted within just a few minutes. Those targets would even be easier to target rather than these ones, for example, Fordow that they now bombed overnight. But he also said, Iran has to come to the table and make peace. But from your view, I'm guessing that you don't think that Iran is going to sort of surrender to this. Rather, we're going to see even more escalation now following this.
I think it is very likely for us to see escalation of conflict. The Iranian regime has pursued an anti-American agenda for a long time, since the revolution. So fighting with the United States actually fits in quite nicely with the Iranian foreign policy and ideology. And it's very unfortunate because it's going to not only bring misery and anarchy to the people of Iran, it's going to inflict pain on the whole region.
I did also pick up on a point here. Donald Trump called Iran the #1 state sponsor of terror. Is he trying to paint Iran and Tehran in sort of the worst possible light here?
Absolutely, absolutely. The United States has a number of issues with Iran. One is Iran's regional policy and support for Hezbollah and various proxies. But that issue has basically been managed in the past year or so by Israel effectively and by some anti-Assad forces that the United States had supported in the past. So Iranian regional policy regional reach is already pretty much contained. The other issue is Iran's nuclear program, and that was being negotiated. We know that just before the Israeli attack on Iran more than a week ago, there were weeks of negotiation between Iran and the United States to try and find some kind of a diplomatic solution to Iran's nuclear program. And even before the recent U.S. attack on Iran, there were talks in Geneva between Iran and 3 European powers that were trying to find a diplomatic solution, and the European powers were positive about the prospect of finding a middle ground. So the US is really pursuing effectively, I believe, regime change in Iran, which is a very, very dangerous agenda to pursue. We saw what happened with regime change in Iraq, more than 2 decades of anarchy and mayhem befalling the population in Iraq. So that seems to be the hidden agenda here.
All right, Professor Shahram Akbarzadeh, thank you so much for your time tonight and analyzing these words from Donald Trump. Thank you again.
Thanks for having me.